traditional welcome. I think we've got folks here. We're still waiting on the links for the OSS North America stuff. What I should add here is a link for, there was also an interview that was done by theCUBE about OmniBOR. So we got quite a lot of good exposure there. And I know there was an episode of the Iterate Fireside Chat that had folks chatting about OmniBOR last week, and as soon as that video goes up, we should actually add that here as well. So there's been lots of exciting talks going on lately on this stuff.
I saw your speech. It was fun. It was really quite good.
Yeah, the Cube is always an interesting audience to talk to, because the audience for the Cube is very technical, but that doesn't mean they're technical at what you're talking about. And so it's always really interesting how you structure, how you explain things on the Cube as a result, because you're dealing with very bright folks who are deep on often several things, but you can't guarantee that they're going to have all the reference that you would like them to have. So
it sounds like they got it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it helps that the idea is not that complicated. All right, upcoming CFPs. So again, want to encourage folks. We've got several upcoming things that folks. Let's see, this may have fallen. There's some reproducible build stuff coming up. Usenix security is coming up. Those sorts of things. So, and I highly encourage folks to add things to the conference sharing list. I think we're sort of about to exit the spring conference period. So things are probably going to be a little bit quiet for a while as we go into the summer, because we tend to see far fewer conferences in the summer and across the holidays. So it's sort of the spring and fall season. Do we have anything new to review with community tool outreach today? Okay. Do we have anything from folks on POCs?
Well, I could demo my POC if you're interested.
Definitely interested. Let me go ahead actually and add this here for posterity to the agenda. Do you want to share?
Sure. Here, you have to enable it.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. I forget that every freaking time. It's one of the tricky things about running open source projects is you need a bit of security on the sharing, lest you get Zoom bombed.
Yeah.
But cool. All right, so you should be able to share now. And I added a link to your repo here.
Okay. This one? Hang on a sec. Okay. Oh, now we're sharing. Okay. Now you can see the motorcycle. Okay. Can you see the screenshot with the motorcycle?
Yes.
You're
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, I definitely can see the screenshot with the motorcycle.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're looking at the right screen. Let's see. Where do I start? So maybe we'll take a quick look at the code, and then I'll run it, and I'll give you my thoughts. Because I have a few thoughts. Why won't it open up? Okay, because it's on the other screen. Hang on a sec. Here it is. Basically, it does the same thing it did, I think, last time we showed it, which is to say that it inspects it live, it looks at the modules as they're loaded, and then it would create a document such as this over here. In addition, what I've done is I just wrote this little thing called experiment write to PYC. So you can write to the PYC file, and I call it experiment, and there's a flag for it, and there's a reason for it, and so there's a reason why I call it experiment and why I'm suggesting that maybe this isn't a good idea. But let's run it first, and then we'll get back to that. In Omni, let's kill this. Super. Just to make sure we've got nothing up my sleeves. So a regular run would look like. Okay, so we'll test this here, and I'll show you the test code. Hold on a sec. Test code. Okay. Here's the test code. It doesn't do much of anything, except it pushes a bunch of stuff. It does print something out so that you know it actually ran. But that's it. So it's important you get to see that it runs. We'll run it now. And there it's done. It printed out this, which is brilliant. Now we go here, and it has populated this. So one thing maybe I have a question about, we can discuss this, is I'm not printing out paths, and maybe paths should belong somewhere. And you know, it's trivial to put them in, but I'm not doing it right now because I didn't see other people doing it, which is not a good reason for doing things. So you'll see like several of these, and that's because most libraries have an init file, and they're unique to, you know, so they're all different, but they're real. And now the other thing, so what we can do now and say, okay, let's take a look at the PYC file. So this is the PYC file. The strings in it anyways, and you'll notice stat strings always get carried over, of course. Now we'll run the same thing. Let's see here, and then we'll say, let's see. Okay. Oopsie, did I make a mistake? Append manifest?
I think append manifest may be for the py omnibor argument, not for the argument of the Python interpreter.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Not correct. There we go. So should be the same thing here. That hasn't changed. But then if we go, and this is what we'll want to talk about. So there, and you can see I've created a section in begin OmniBOR and OmniBOR. It's the same information you see here. It's not formatted nicely. You know, and that's essentially how it works. If you do something like, if you were to do something like this, and you didn't have a file because, oops, I can't think. Yeah, there we go. If you do that, so it tells you that a file wasn't installed. A pip file was installed, which is nice, I think. But you still get everything except for the stuff that couldn't be installed because you didn't do a pip. This is more stuff because it's got more stuff in the header.
Yep.
So that's essentially it. Now, the thing I'd like to well, let me discuss this briefly, and then I can take questions. So let's just over here. Let's see, get the same lovely face. And so in reading a lot about the PYC files, this is what's supposed to be in them. The 4-byte magic number is, I don't know how it's generated. Nor should I care, because it changes with each release, I think. And then the modification timestamp, and then the code itself, which is some kind of binary form. And then what I can do. So one thing I didn't demonstrate is you can actually go. Let's do this way. And you can do something like Python, and we saw a second ago that it has those strings in it. You can still run it, So one of the things, so that was a necessary test, obviously. If you change the PYC file, can you still run it? And the answer is yes, you can. So this then becomes there's a sort of philosophical. Let's see, where am I? There we go. Kind of a sort of philosophical idea, which is to say, or technical, which is to say, this PYC file, how it's defined, what it does, et cetera, is often changed, on new releases, and what's in it is essentially considered to be implementation details, which is to say, it's not our business to be messing around with the PYC file because it wasn't designed to be. The fact that what I did works is, I think, potentially one can consider it a hack. And there's no guarantee it will work for future releases or any other release, as I've only tested one release. I did test in both Ubuntu and Windows, and it behaves the same way in both cases. So there is an idea that maybe this isn't such a good idea, but you can do it now, and I don't from a technical perspective, I guess it could be something that we should be concerned about. And my idea with respect to that was to reach out to the Python community or the Python leaders in the Python community and discuss this with them and see one of two things: whether one is what I'm doing just fine, and they have I don't think it is based on what I've read. Although there's not a lot written about it, to be honest. And the other is, would they allow for this in future releases? Is it something they would consider because they might not have considered it before?
It's an interesting question, and I would love to hear from folks like Young-Kui who are more current and active users of Python. There was an era in which you had a lot of people who were super happy about distributing .pyc files. And what I'm not clear on is like how compatible is that between different releases? I understand, for example, that PYC files may be written differently even between minor versions of Python. But the question is, if I ship a bunch of PYC files for a major version of Python, will they keep running? And how prevalent is PYC only distribution at this point?
I don't see PYC files being distributed. a lot of people don't know that you can just even execute a PYC file directly, and that's a lot of people don't do it. But as you point, well, for one thing, but like if I'm running Windows and someone else is running Linux, obviously it won't work. That's one thing. And then, yeah, as there's no guarantee that it will work between distributions.
That's actually interesting. So the PYC files do not work between platform shifts? Like I can't take a PYC file compiled on Linux and run it on Windows? Yeah.
Yeah. Here's why. Because so you know, Windows uses DLLs and Linux uses shared objects, for example. And there's an equivalent. There's two equivalent files in Python. One's called a .pyd file, and the other is called a .pyo file. And you will only see .pyd files in Windows. So PYO files will only be something you can see in you know, Linux, for example. So my output, you know, for wherever I put it, not that, but my SHA-1 output will differ, you know, depending on what platform I'm running it on. So when I run it on Windows, you'll see PYD files. I'm not seeing PYO files in Linux for some reason, and maybe it's just because they're not using it for these particular cases. But I have seen them in the past. So yeah, the answer is if I take a PYC file from a Windows you know, platform and put it on a Linux platform, it shouldn't work.
Okay, so I mean, effectively, that sounds like the PYC files at this stage in Python are basically just caching of the local compilation. Again, Yonkui, does that match your understanding of the world? I know you do a lot more with Python these days than I do. It's been quite a few years since I've been a really active Python user.
Let me actually test this. Oh, it actually worked. Hey, I take some of that back.
I mean, I would expect I would expect it to work because the PYC files I would expect to be basically the PYC files I would expect to be Python bytecode, which I would expect to be sort of independent of the underlying operating system or anything else. There are other files that do get dependencies in them further down the stack and in the interpreter, but I would expect the PYC files to be more generic. I mean, what we're really dealing with here is how do we have a conversation with the Python community about what makes sense in a Pythonic way, like what's natively idiomatic for bringing OmniBOR into Python. Is I guess the part of the conversation we're currently having, right?
Do you have somebody who has taken the lead on that?
I don't think currently. Let me take a quick look at the community spreadsheet and see if there's anyone who is sort of gesturing in that direction.
Okay, I can give up my screen share, I guess. Right? Unless I don't think I have anything else to show.
Okay, let me go ahead and go back to sharing the browser. Can everyone see the browser window?
Yes.
So it looks like Julia Ferrioli has some social contacts there. I could reach out to her. She's not been around here for a little bit. But I could definitely reach out to her and see if she might know people to introduce us to in that space.
Okay. And I mean, anything I've said about, those are just opinions regarding the PYC files and whether it's a good or bad idea. They're not facts, they're just opinions.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And like, part of what I'm trying to sort out in my own mind is like, what's real in terms of the technical bits and the underlying practice that's sometimes seen in the wild. There, because I know, I knew a lot about this question 15 years ago, but I don't know a lot about this question today in terms of what's going on. Make sense?
Yeah, and for yeah. So like I said, I could be. I'm not going to I'm not going to go to the mat on this one because I'm a little uncertain myself as to what the right thing is. It might possibly be just fine to write it to the PYC file. It works, and maybe it's okay. I do have, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of it really comes down to like what is the sensible way to do this in a Pythonic sense, right? Because one of the things we do want to try and be respectful of as much as possible is sort of local idioms, right? So when we're mucking about with ELF files, we sort of figured out that the proper local idiom was probably to have a note section. When we're mucking around in Python, you're looking at something, sort of somewhat different. And the real question is, what is the proper idiom there? And idioms are always sort of like local. There's some element of how the language actually works, but there's also some element of what's the actual practice that people carry out with them.
Yeah. Well, I'd be interested in other people's opinions, as I kind of on the fence myself, as I say.
Yep, understood. One other thing, I don't know if Young-Kui is ready to sort of talk through some of it yet or not, is I did want to point out we do have some stuff now for indexing Debian packages in order to map blobs to packages in the hopes of getting to a place where we've got tooling to take artifact dependency graphs and an index and produce minimum SBOMs. Do you want to talk at all about that today, Young-Kui, or would you rather do it some other time?
Yeah,
some other time is a perfectly fine answer.
Yeah, I just wrote that this brief summary for that. I'm working on something. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I think you already tried this, right? Right? Did you try it?
I haven't tried this myself. I've had some other folks who reached out interested in this sort of work who I've pointed to it. So
it's
because
very small Python program. So, I mean, people familiar with Python should be able to just check source code. If not, just do the command. Maybe.
I mean, even if you're not a practitioner of Python, Python was literally designed to be easy to read. So most people can figure out what's going on. This was sort of part of the one of the other things I wanted to mention. I know I wasn't here for the conversation after Open Source Summit North America. I had an unfortunate conflict, but one of the things that kept coming up repeatedly at Open Source North America was the notion. People are very, very happy with the notion of artifact dependency graphs and the precision they bring. And there was a lot of interest in being able to build indexes that would map sort of source code blobs, the leaves that you would have in your artifact dependency graph, to package name versions, so that somebody could take an artifact dependency graph and take an index like the one that Young-Kui's got a script to build across Debian, and output an SBOM, a minimum SBOM from that, so that you can sort of make artifact dependency graphs part of your build process, and then get a very high fidelity SBOM out the other end, because a lot of people are very concerned about the fidelity of the SBOMs they have. And so that there was a lot of interest from folks in the indexing of data, in the sort of hallway discussions. Cool. Anything else from folks on POCs today? Okay. Any other questions from implementers today? Okay. Moving on to sort of active discussions and road to initial spec things. These are things we sort of just generically have been carrying forward. Are there pieces here that we haven't discussed recently that folks would like to drag forward into the light, to talk a little bit more about today?
I guess the question to embed or not embed is the one that keeps coming often, but today I think Ava's not there, so maybe we can't have.
Yeah, there are a couple discussions. I know Ava reached out. They're feeling under the weather today. That's why they're not able to be here. Nothing serious, I'm told, just, you know, run-of-the-mill sorts of stuff. But yeah, that may be a discussion for a better discussion for another time. So I guess the question is there anything else that folks would like to discuss today?
There's also the topic of where to create the OmniBOR documents, right? About OmniBOR DIR. What should it be? So whether it should be taken as an option or it should not. I think there were some discussions along that lines. So
yeah, it's just sort of the question of you know, basically, do we create, what do we do if we don't get an OmniBOR specified? Is that more or less the question?
yes. So should it always be specified in the environment variable, or can we allow a default?
And part of that question actually gets back to what do you do? I think part of where this gets to a root, and this is where Ava has some strong feelings, is right now, if you don't tell me you're doing an OmniBOR thing with either an OmniBOR dir environment variable or a flag, then most of the tools are just defaulting back to their normal behavior, right? They don't do the OmniBOR thing. And that has a lot of advantages, particularly as we try and go upstream.
So for LLVM and the GCC, the default, I think previously probably it was discussed like that. The default is the location where the object files or the artifacts are stored. So that's where they are being created now. But if that needs to be eliminated, and if we have to change the behavior that you know, you write it only if OmniBOR DIR is specified, otherwise you don't generate any OmniBOR data, that the implementation can be adjusted easily, but we just need to agree on.
Yeah, we just need to come to some decision on it. And I think yes, the trick is getting the parties who have strong feelings together at the same time. Between last week when I had an issue and this week when Ava is out, since Ava holds a strong opinion in the opposite direction from my personal opinion, I don't feel comfortable, you know, sort of nudging the community one way or the other in their absence.
Sure.
It's not nice to try and advance your argument when people who disagree with you are not here. But I think, you know, effectively, you know, so I mean that's I think kind of where we are right now in that discussion. And I don't think that's blocking yet. It will eventually be, but I don't think it's blocking yet.
I have a question about the spec in general.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of discussion going on. When something gets, resolved or agreed upon, is the spec being updated?
Usually, is there something where you
Okay.
think where we've come to a resolution where we haven't updated the spec?
No, it's just I was looking at the spec the other day, and I was wondering if there was stuff that was missing.
Well, there's definitely some work that needs to be done still on the spec, no question. In particular, one of the things that I have found pretty universally is Andrew's introduction of the concept of an input manifest, basically, which is just labeling the OmniBOR directory as an input manifest, makes it infinitely easier to explain OmniBOR to people. It turns out that was sort of a missing piece in the chain of explanation to people. Most people don't skip to artifact dependency graphs as readily. And so, and we got some feedback on that because we talked about it in those terms at Open Source North America. And we've got the introduction that Andrew had written, but I think there's some need to sort of bring things back around in the broader spec towards that terminology as well, which I don't think really changes anything in terms of behavior. So for example, I don't think any of that change in terminology would shift anything that the tool implementers have currently done. But it just gets to the a question of how to explain it in the most straightforward way.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else that folks feel we should talk about today? Or that people would like to talk about today? Okay, then I'm inclined to yield back the time for folks, if that's okay. Sound good?
Sure,
Yes,
thank you.
Cool.